After spending 32 years as a devoted mother, sacrificing everything to give my only son the best life possible, he told me I was just a widow who should be grateful for his attention when I asked to stay in his guest house. So I did. Something that shocked everyone. I calculated every penny I'd spent raising him, from his first diaper to his college graduation, and sent him an itemized bill for his entire childhood. The look on his face when he opened that envelope was worth every tear I'd shed over his cruel words. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Martha Bennett, and at 68 years old, I found myself standing in front of my son's sprawling Victorian home in Burlington, Vermont, clutching a suitcase that contained what remained of my life. The bitter December wind cut through my wool coat, but it was nothing compared to the chill I felt when Andrew opened his front door. My own son, the boy I had raised alone since he was 7, looked at me not with the warmth of family, but with the cool assessment of someone evaluating an inconvenience. "Mom, you're early," he said, checking his watch. "Rebecca isn't back from her yoga class yet." No hug, no kiss on the cheek, not even a proper smile. Just an observation that I had disrupted his schedule by arriving 15 minutes before the agreed time. The son who used to cling to my legs when I returned from my second job, who would wrap his small arms around my neck and tell me I was his favorite person in the whole universe, now couldn't spare a moment of genuine welcome for the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. "The bus arrived ahead of schedule," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady as snowflakes began to settle on my shoulders. "The driver said it was better to get ahead of the storm." Andrew glanced at the darkening sky and sighed, as if the approaching snowstorm was somehow my fault. "Fine, come in then." He stepped aside reluctantly, allowing just enough space for me to squeeze past with my suitcase. The entryway of his home was immaculate, all gleaming hardwood and tasteful artwork that probably cost more than I had made in a month at the diner where I'd worked for 20 years. The house smelled of cinnamon and pine, a carefully cultivated, holiday atmosphere that felt more like a magazine spread than a home. "You can leave your shoes here," Andrew instructed, pointing to a neat row of footwear by the door. Rebecca just had the floors refinished. I slipped off my worn boots, suddenly conscious of the darned hole in my left sock, a small imperfection I hadn't had time to fix before the eviction notice came. 2 weeks ago, I had been making breakfast in the small apartment I'd called home. For 15 years when the landlord knocked on my door. The building had been sold, he explained, and the new owners were converting it into luxury condominiums. I had 30 days to find a new place. In a housing market where even the smallest apartments were beyond my fixed income, I had swallowed my pride and called Andrew. My brilliant, successful son, the corporate attorney whose education I had, funded through a combination of 3 jobs, cashed in life insurance from his father's policy, and the selling of the family home I had lovingly restored with my own hands. Surely he would help his mother in her time of need. "It's just temporary," I had assured him over the phone, "until I can find something affordable." There had been a long pause before he agreed, his voice carrying that particular tone he used when speaking to difficult clients, professional, but tinged with impatience. "Fine, but only until after New Year's. We have important people coming over for the holidays, and Rebecca has a vision for how everything should be." Now, as I followed Andrew through his home, past the sleek kitchen where his wife Rebecca was arranging a charcuterie board, giving me a small, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, I felt like an intruder. My son, the little boy who had once pressed dandelions into my hand and called them sunshine flowers, now walked briskly ahead of me, pointing out rooms without stopping. "Guest bathroom there, office, please don't go in, living room, dining room, and here's where you'll be staying." He pushed open a door at the end of the hallway to reveal a small room dominated by a pull-out sofa. It was clearly used for storage, holiday. Decorations in clear plastic bins were stacked in one corner, and exercise equipment occupied another. The window overlooked the driveway rather than the stunning mountain view I had glimpsed from the living room. "This is the best we can do on short notice," Andrew said, setting my suitcase down. "Rebecca uses the actual guest room as her home. Office now. We need to keep that private." I nodded, forcing a smile. "This is fine, dear. Thank you for making space for me." "Dinner's at 7, he continued, already backing toward the door. "Rebecca's parents are coming, so try to be presentable." His eyes flicked to my travel-rumpled clothes before he disappeared down the hallway. I sat down heavily on the edge of the sofa bed, my hands trembling slightly as I unzipped my suitcase. Inside were the few precious items I had managed to keep when I downsized after selling our family home to pay for Andrew's law school. Photo albums, Harold's watch, the quilt my grandmother had made for my wedding. The rest of my belongings were in a small storage unit, paid up for 3 months, the length of time I had given myself to find a new home. Harold, my husband, Andrew's father, had died when Andrew was 7. It was a sudden heart attack that took him in the middle of a Little League game. One moment he was cheering for our son's team, and the next he was gone, leaving me a 36-year-old widow with a mortgage, a small life insurance policy, and a devastated little boy who didn't understand why his daddy wasn't coming home. I pulled out a photo album and opened it to a picture taken on Andrew's 8th birthday, the first one after Harold died. In it, I was kneeling beside Andrew as he blew out the candles on a homemade cake, my face showing both grief and determination. That year had been the hardest, working as a bank teller during the day and taking on evening shifts at a local restaurant to make ends meet. I had learned to repair leaky faucets, change the oil in our aging station wagon, and sew patches onto Andrew's jeans, all skills Harold had handled before. I turned the page to find Andrew on his high school graduation day, his arm around my shoulders, both of us beaming with pride. By then, I had worked my way up to assistant manager at the bank, supplementing our income with weekend catering jobs and selling handmade quilts at local craft fairs. Every spare penny went into his college fund. "What a tiny apartment you have." "Now, Martha," Harold's mother had remarked when she visited us after I sold our family home to finance Andrew's law school education. "Are you sure this was necessary?" I had simply nodded. Andrew got into Georgetown. It's his dream. The truth was, I would have lived in a cardboard box if it meant seeing my son fulfill the potential that Harold had always believed he possessed. The cramped one-bedroom apartment had been a small price to pay for Andrew's future, a future that now seemed to have no place for me in it. A gentle knock on the door pulled me from my memories. It was Rebecca, her sleek blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing an outfit that looked casual but which I recognized as expensive. "Martha," she said, her voice pleasant but distant. "I just wanted to check if you need anything before my parents arrive." Rebecca Whitman Bennett had always intimidated me. The daughter of a state senator and a renowned surgeon, she had grown up in circles that I, a bank teller's daughter who had married a mechanic, had never entered. When Andrew brought her home 5 years ago, I had been struck by her poise, her confident way of speaking, and the almost imperceptible way she had assessed my modest apartment. "I'm fine, thank you," I assured her. "The room is lovely." We both knew it was a polite fiction, but Rebecca nodded as if accepting a compliment. "We weren't expecting company for the holidays, so I'm afraid the house isn't quite ready for guests." The emphasis on guests wasn't lost on me. I wasn't family in her eyes. I was an intruder. Never mind that I had raised the man she married, had shaped him into the successful attorney she had fallen in love with. "I understand," I said, "and I appreciate you letting me stay until I find a new place." Rebecca tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, revealing a diamond earring that caught the light. "Yes, well, Andrew mentioned it would just be until New Year's. We have the Hendersons' charity gala on January 2nd, and we'll need to prepare the house." The message was clear. My presence had an expiration date. "Of course," I replied. "I'm sure I'll find something by then." Rebecca nodded, satisfied. "Dinner's at 7. Andrew's parents always dress for dinner, even for family gatherings. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. With that, she closed the door, leaving me alone with the implication that my usual attire might not meet their standards. I opened my suitcase wider, searching for the one nice outfit I had brought, a navy blue dress I had worn to Andrew's law school graduation. It was classic enough that it wouldn't look obviously dated, though I had bought it nearly a decade ago. As I shook out the wrinkles, I caught sight of my reflection in the small mirror above a desk in the corner. The woman looking back at me seemed suddenly older than I remembered. My silver hair, once dark brown like Andrew's, was pulled back in a simple bun, and the lines around my eyes had deepened since Harold's death. But they were laugh lines. Mostly, from years of finding joy despite hardship, of celebrating small victories. Andrew's first A+ on a school paper, the day we paid off the mortgage, the phone call announcing his acceptance to law school. I had never remarried after Harold died. There had been opportunities, a kind widower at church, a regular customer at the bank who always brought me coffee, but I had always declined. Andrew needs stability, I would say, or I'm focusing on his college applications right now. The truth was, I had poured all of my love into my son, seeing him as the living legacy of the man I had lost too soon. Now, standing in my son's home as an unwelcome guest, I wondered if I had made a mistake. Had my dedication to Andrew's future come at the cost of building my own? Had my sacrifice somehow diminished me in his eyes? I pushed these thoughts aside as I changed into my navy dress, applied a touch of lipstick, and pinned a small brooch, a gift from Harold on our last anniversary, to my collar. Whatever Andrew and Rebecca thought of me, I would hold my head high. After all, I had faced far worse challenges than an uncomfortable family dinner. When I emerged from the makeshift guest room at precisely 6:55 p.m., the house had been transformed. Candles flickered on the dining table, soft classical music played from hidden speakers, and the smell of expensive perfume mingled with the aroma of roasting meat. Rebecca's parents, Dr. James Whitman and former state senator Elizabeth Whitman, were already seated in the living room, cocktails in hand. "Mother," Andrew said as I entered, his voice carrying that same professional tone. "These are Rebecca's parents, Dr. and Mrs. Whitman. This is my mother, Martha Bennett." Dr. Whitman rose politely, extending his hand. "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Bennett." "Please, call me Martha," I said, shaking his hand. Elizabeth Whitman gave me a practiced smile. "Andrew tells us you've had some housing troubles. How unfortunate." There was something in her tone, a subtle condescension, that made my spine stiffen. Before I could respond, Rebecca appeared with a tray of appetizers. "Mom, Dad, Martha, dinner's almost ready. Andrew, would you pour Martha a glass of wine?" Andrew moved to the bar cart, selecting a bottle. "Red or white, Mom?" "Red, please," I said, grateful for something to hold on to. As Andrew handed me the glass, his fingers briefly touched mine. For a moment, just a fleeting second, I saw a glimpse of my little boy in his eyes. The child who had once run to me with skinned knees and broken toys, trusting that I could fix anything. Then it was gone, replaced by the cool efficiency of a man performing a social obligation. Dinner was an exercise in navigating invisible boundaries. The conversation flowed around me, discussions of people I didn't know, events I hadn't attended, references to vacation homes and investment portfolios that existed in a world separate from mine. I smiled and nodded at appropriate moments, occasionally offering a comment that was acknowledged politely before the discussion moved on. It was during dessert, an elaborate tiramisu that Rebecca had picked up from that little Italian place downtown, that the conversation turned to holiday plans. "We'll be hosting Christmas Eve here," Rebecca announced, And then the traditional Christmas dinner at your house, Mom. Wonderful, Elizabeth Whitman replied. James has invited the new hospital director and his wife. They're simply fascinating. They spent 3 years working with Doctors Without Borders in Sudan. Oh, I said, seeing an opportunity to join the conversation. That reminds me of the volunteer medical team that came to the community center where I help serve meals. They provide free checkups for people who can't afford regular health care. Their cow. Table fell silent for a moment. Then Dr. Whitman cleared his throat. Yes, community outreach is important. Speaking of healthcare, Andrew mentioned you're having some issues with your insurance coverage? I felt heat rise to my cheeks. I hadn't mentioned this to Andrew, but clearly he had been discussing my financial situation with his in-laws. It's just a matter of sorting out some paperwork, I said lightly. Nothing serious. If you need help navigating the system, Dr. Whitman offered, I know several administrators who might be able to expedite things. The offer was kind, but the implication stung that I, who had managed household finances, insurance claims, and college applications without any help for decades, needed someone to intervene on my behalf. Thank you, I replied. But I've been handling these matters for quite some time now. Still, Andrew interjected, it wouldn't hurt to have Dad look into it. After all, you're not as familiar with how these systems work now. Things have changed. There it was, the subtle undermining that had become increasingly common in our interactions, as if my age had somehow erased my competence, my experience, my history of solving problems far more complex than insurance paperwork. I suppose they have, I conceded, not wanting to create tension at the dinner table. But inside, something shifted. A small crack appearing in the foundation of patience and understanding I had built over decades of motherhood. After dinner, Rebecca's parents departed with promises of texting later about the holiday meal planning. Andrew disappeared into his home office for an important call, and Rebecca busied herself with cleaning up, waving away my offers to help. I have a system, she explained, stacking dishes in a particular order. It's easier if I just do it myself. Left. To my own devices, I retreated to the makeshift guest room, closing the door quietly behind me. The pull-out sofa creaked as I sat down, suddenly exhausted from the effort of maintaining appearances. I reached for my phone, an older model that Andrew often teased me about, and saw a text message from my friend Lucille, checking to see if I had arrived safely. Lucille Fisher had been my friend since we were both young mothers. We had raised our children together, supported each other through Harold's death and her divorce, and now shared the challenges of aging in a world that seemed increasingly designed to make us feel obsolete. Made it to Andrew's, I texted back. Everyone is very polite. Lucille would understand what I wasn't saying. She had met Rebecca only once, at Andrew's wedding, but had summed her up with devastating accuracy. That girl has never had to wash her own socks, and it shows. As I prepared for bed in the small attached bathroom, carefully applying my night cream and hanging my navy dress to prevent wrinkles, I heard voices from the kitchen. Andrew and Rebecca, speaking in hushed but clearly agitated tones. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but sound carried in the quiet house. Can't just stay indefinitely, Rebecca was saying. You promised it would just be until New Year's. I know, Andrew replied. But where is she supposed to go? Everything in. Her price range has waiting lists months long. What about those senior apartments over on Maple Street? Those are basically glorified nursing homes, Becca. Well, she is getting older. Maybe it's time to consider something like that, somewhere with staff who can check on her. My hand froze. In the act of applying face cream. A nursing home? I was 68, in excellent health, and had lived independently my entire adult life. The suggestion that I should be relegated to an institutional setting simply because I had gray hair was both insulting and terrifying. Maybe, Andrew sighed. I I don't know what to do with her." "Do with her?" Rebecca echoed. "She's your mother, not a project. Look, I sympathize, but she can't stay in the craft room past January. My mom is bringing her quilt group over for their annual retreat the second weekend of January. That room needs to be cleared out." There was a long pause before Andrew spoke again. "Fine. I'll talk to her tomorrow. See if she's made any progress looking for a place." I turned on the faucet, letting water run to mask any sound I might make. My hands were shaking as I finished my bedtime routine. "What to do with her?" Andrew had said, as if I were a problem to be solved rather than a person with agency, with dignity. As I settled into the uncomfortable pull-out bed, I found myself looking at the photo album again. This time, I turned to do the last page, a picture of Andrew on his wedding day. He looked so handsome in his tailored suit, beaming at the camera with his arm around Rebecca. I was there too, standing slightly to the side, wearing the same navy dress I had worn to dinner tonight. I remembered that day vividly. How proud I had felt watching my son marry. How I had given a toast celebrating the accomplished man he had become. How I had danced with him to "What a Wonderful World," the same song I used to sing him to sleep with when he was small. That night, after most guests had left, Andrew had hugged me tightly and whispered, "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Mom. Everything I am, I owe to you." Where had that son gone? When had his gratitude been replaced by obligation, by annoyance, by the cruel calculus of determining what to do with his aging mother? As I closed the album and turned out the light, I made a decision. Tomorrow, I would begin looking for alternatives, not just for housing, but for how I would define the next chapter of my life. Because one thing was becoming painfully clear. I could not build that future on the assumption that my son would provide the support I had always given him. In the darkness of the makeshift guest room, surrounded by holiday decorations and exercise equipment, I felt something stirring within me, not just hurt or disappointment, but the first embers of a righteous anger that had been smoldering beneath decades of maternal sacrifice. It was time to remember who Martha Bennett was beyond being Andrew's mother. And it was time for Andrew to remember it too. I woke the next morning to the sound of hushed voices and clinking dishware. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains of the craft room, illuminating dust particles that danced in the air. For a moment, I forgot where I was, reaching instinctively for the familiar contours of my own bedside table, my fingers finding only air. Then, reality crashed back. I was in my son's home, sleeping on a pull-out sofa, with nowhere else to go. The digital clock on a nearby shelf read 7:42 a.m. I had always been an early riser. Decades of 6 a.m. shifts at the bank had programmed my body to wake before dawn, but exhaustion from yesterday's travel and emotional turmoil had kept me in bed longer than usual. I rose quickly, not wanting to give Andrew and Rebecca another reason to find fault with me. After dressing in a pair of sensible slacks and a burgundy sweater I had knitted myself 3 winters ago, I made my way to the kitchen. Andrew sat at the island counter, scrolling through his phone while sipping from a monogrammed coffee mug. Rebecca stood at the stove, her back to me, whisking something in a copper pan. "Good morning," I said, forcing brightness into my voice. Andrew looked up, startled. "Mom, we thought you'd sleep later." "I've been an early riser for 40 years, I replied, moving toward the coffee maker, a complicated machine with multiple buttons and settings. "May I?" Rebecca turned, her silk robe catching the morning light. "Of course, though it's a bit temperamental. Here, let me." She reached past me, pressing buttons in a specific sequence that produced a gentle hum from the machine. The subtle implication was clear. Even this simple task was beyond my capabilities. "I made frittata," she said, gesturing to the stove. "Do you eat eggs, Martha? I should have asked." "Yes, thank you. That's very kind." Andrew cleared his throat. Mom, I've been thinking about your situation. I've made a few calls this morning. My heart sank. Oh, there's a waiting list for Sunset Pines, that senior community on the north side of town. But my college roommate's father is on their board. He might be able to expedite things. Rebecca placed a small, artfully arranged portion of frittata before me. It's a lovely place, Martha. They have activities, outings, even a little salon on site. I stared at the perfectly cooked eggs, my appetite suddenly gone. Sunset Pines is an assisted living facility, Andrew. It has independent living units too, he countered, not meeting my eyes. And the advantage is that when you need more assistance, you won't have to move again. The implication hung in the air between us. He was already planning for my decline, already positioning me in a place where I would be someone else's responsibility. I appreciate your concern, I said carefully, but I'm perfectly capable of living independently. I just need a reasonably priced apartment. Rebecca exchanged a glance with Andrew. The thing is, Martha, there really isn't anything reasonably priced in Burlington anymore. Not in safe neighborhoods, anyway. What about the guest house? I asked, the question slipping out before I could reconsider. I had noticed it yesterday, a charming, small structure at the far end of their property, visible from my bedroom window. It looks like it's not being used, and I could pay you rent with my Social Security. The temperature in the kitchen seemed to drop 10 degrees. Andrew's face hardened into something I barely recognized. That's not possible, he said flatly. We use it as a home office and gym, Rebecca added quickly. It's not set up for living. I took a small bite of frittata to hide my disappointment. I understand. I'll keep looking then. Andrew checked his watch and stood abruptly. I have to get to the office. Big case. Depositions all day. He drained his coffee mug and leaned over to kiss Rebecca's cheek. To me, he gave a perfunctory nod. We'll talk more tonight, Mom. After he left, Rebecca busied herself cleaning up, declining my offers of help with the same excuse as the night before. Her system, her preference. With nothing to do and feeling increasingly in the way, I retreated to the craft room to make calls. My first was to Lucille. It's worse than I thought, I whispered into the phone, mindful of how sound carried in the house. They're trying to put me in Sunset Pines. That place where Bob's mother is? Lucille gasped. Martha, she needs help. Bathing. You're nowhere near that stage. Exactly. But Andrew seems to think it's the perfect solution. Out of sight, out of mind. Lucille's voice hardened. You raised that boy better than this. I thought I did, I said, my throat tightening. Listen, I'm going to head downtown to check the community bulletin boards. Sometimes rentals get posted there before they hit the websites. Good idea. And Martha? Remember, you can always stay with me if things get too tense there. I smiled into the phone. Your one-bedroom apartment is smaller than mine was, Lucy. Where would you put me in the bathtub? We'd manage, she said firmly. That's what friends do. After assuring Rebecca I would be back for dinner, I caught the local bus downtown. The temperature had dropped overnight, and fresh snow crunched beneath my boots as I made my way through the familiar streets of Burlington. I had lived in this city my entire adult life, watched it transform from a sleepy college town to a bustling hub of technology startups and artisanal breweries. Somewhere in that transformation, I had been left behind. My bank teller's pension, and Social Security no match for the skyrocketing cost of living. The community center on Maple Street was warm and welcoming, with a bulletin board crowded with colorful flyers. I scanned them hopefully. Rooms for rent, shared housing, subletting opportunities. But each option presented its own impossibility. Rents far beyond my budget, college students seeking same-age roommates, short-term leases that would leave me searching again in months. Martha? Is that you? I turned to find Edward Simmons, the center's longtime director, smiling at me. In his 70s himself, Edward had been running the community center for over 20 years. We had served on the holiday food drive committee together back when Andrew was in high school. "Edward, how are you?" He embraced me warmly. "I'm well, but what are you doing studying the rental board like it holds the secrets of the universe? Don't tell me you're looking for a place?" I explained my situation, the eviction, the temporary stay with Andrew, the increasingly urgent need to find something affordable. Edward frowned. "That's rough. The market here is brutal right now." He hesitated, then added, "You know, we're about to advertise for a new part-time administrative assistant. It comes with a small apartment above the center. Nothing fancy, just a studio with a kitchenette. But the rent would be deducted from your salary, making it quite affordable." My heart leaped. "Edward, that sounds perfect." His face grew serious. "The pay isn't much, Martha, and the apartment needs some work. It's been used for storage since Mrs. Abernathy moved out last year." "I'm not afraid of a little work," I assured him. "And combined with my Social Security and pension, even a small salary would help tremendously." Edward nodded slowly. "Well then, come upstairs and have a look. If you're interested, I can put your application at the top of the pile. The board respects my recommendations." The apartment was indeed small and in need of attention, dusty with outdated fixtures and faded wallpaper. But the windows faced east, promising morning sunlight, and the location was central to everything I loved about Burlington. I could walk to the library, the farmer's market, and the senior center where I played bridge on Wednesday afternoons. "It's perfect," I told Edward, already imagining how I would arrange my few pieces of furniture, which colors I would paint, the walls. "The board meets next Tuesday," he said. "If they approve, and I can't imagine why they wouldn't, you could move in by the 1st of the month." Hope bloomed in my chest for the first time since receiving the eviction notice. "Thank you, Edward. This means more than you know." I spent the rest of the afternoon in the library, researching small space organization and making lists of affordable furniture options. By the time I caught the bus back to Andrews, I was buzzing with excitement, eager to share my potential solution. When I returned, the house was filled with the aroma of roasting chicken. Rebecca was setting the dining table, not with the fine china from last night, but with everyday plates. Andrew's voice drifted from his office, the cadence suggesting he was on a business call. "I found a potential place to live," I announced as I hung my coat in the hall closet. Rebecca looked up, surprise evident in her expression. "Already? That's efficient." There was something in her tone, disappointment, that confused me. Hadn't they been eager for me to find my own place? "It's a small apartment above the community center," I explained. "Part of a job package, actually. I'd be working part-time as an administrative assistant." "A job?" Rebecca's eyebrows rose. "At your age?" The casual ageism stung, but I kept my tone light. "I'm 68, not 98. And I worked until I was 65. I'm hardly out of practice." Rebecca seemed flustered. "Of course I didn't mean. It's just surprising, that's all." Andrew emerged from his office, loosening his tie. "What's surprising?" "Your mother has found an apartment," Rebecca said, "above the community center, with a job included." Andrew frowned. "Mom, we talked about Sunset Pines. I've already spoken to the director there." "I don't need assisted living, Andrew," I said, firmly. "This solution is perfect for me. Affordable housing, a small income to supplement my pension, and meaningful work." He shook his head. "The community center? That's in a transitional neighborhood. And what kind of work would they have you doing at your age?" "Administrative assistance," I replied, trying to keep irritation from my voice. "The same work I did for 30 years at the bank, just on a smaller scale." "It sounds exhausting," he said dismissively. "Look, I've arranged for us to tour Sunset Pines tomorrow at 10. At least see it before you make any decisions." I took a deep breath, reminding myself that conflict wouldn't help my situation. "All right, I'll go on the tour. But Andrew, the apartment at the community center could be ready by the 1st of the month. If I get the position, that would solve everything. We'll see, he said in the same tone he had used when Andrew was 13 and begging for an expensive video game console. Now dinner's getting cold. Throughout the meal, Andrew dominated the conversation with stories from his law practice, complex cases, difficult clients, his recent win that had impressed one of the senior partners. Rebecca nodded at appropriate intervals, asking questions that allowed him to elaborate further. Neither of them asked about my day beyond the apartment search or my thoughts on any of the topics they discussed. It was as if I had been reduced to a problem to solve rather than a person with experiences, opinions, and a lifetime of wisdom. The realization settled over me like a heavy blanket. In my son's eyes, I had become nothing more than an elderly dependent, the flip side of the parent-child relationship, but without the love and patience I had always shown him. After dinner, I offered again to help clean up. This time, to my surprise, Rebecca accepted. "You can dry while I wash," she said, handing me a dish towel. We worked in silence for a few minutes before Rebecca spoke again, her voice softer than usual. "Martha, I hope you didn't misunderstand earlier. We want what's best for you." I nodded, carefully drying a wine glass. "I know you do." Sunset Pines is a very good facility. My grandmother lived there for her last few years, and she was very happy. I placed the dry glass in the cabinet. I'm sure it is excellent for people who need that level of care. I'm just not one of them yet. Rebecca sighed, scrubbing at a stubborn spot on a serving platter. "The thing is, we worry about you living alone. What if you fall? What if there's an emergency?" "The same things could happen to anyone at any age," I pointed out. "I've lived alone for 25 years without incident. I take care of myself." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Andrew feels responsible for you. He's trying to do the right thing." I couldn't help the small, bitter laugh that escaped me. Responsible for me? I raised him alone from the age of 7. I worked 3 jobs to put him through college and law school. I sold my home to fund his education. I set down the dish towel, suddenly tired. If anyone should feel responsible, it's not Andrew. Rebecca's cheeks flushed pink. "That's not fair. You chose to make those sacrifices. Parents are supposed to support their children." "Yes, they are," I agreed. "And children should respect their parents, not treat them like burdens to be managed." The kitchen fell silent except for the soft tick of the expensive copper clock on the wall. Rebecca's hands stilled in the soapy water. "I think I can finish up here," she said finally, not meeting my eyes. I recognized the dismissal. "Thank you for dinner. It was delicious." In the craft room, I changed into my nightgown and sat on the edge of the pull-out bed, my mind racing. The conversation with Rebecca had left me unsettled, stirring up emotions I had long suppressed. Yes, I had chosen to make sacrifices for Andrew, but I had never imagined that those sacrifices would one day be dismissed as simply what was expected, that my devotion would be rewarded with condescension and inconvenience. I reached for my phone to text Lucille, but stopped when I heard Andrew and Rebecca's voices from their bedroom across the hall, their conversation carrying through the thin walls. "Absolutely ridiculous," Andrew was saying. "A job at her age? She can barely figure out her smartphone, and now she wants to work in an office." "She seemed pretty excited about it," Rebecca replied. "Maybe it would be good for her to have something to do." "She'll last 2 weeks tops before realizing it's too much," Andrew predicted. "And then what? We'll be right back where we started." "Least she's looking for solutions," Rebecca said. "I was worried she might expect to stay here indefinitely." There was a pause before Andrew spoke again, his voice lower but still audible. "She's always been like this, stubborn, thinking she knows best. When Dad died, I begged her to move us in with Grandma and Grandpa. Their house was bigger, and Grandma could have helped raise me while Mom worked. But no, She insisted we could manage on our own. Maybe she wanted to maintain her independence, Rebecca suggested. Andrew scoffed. Independence. That's always been her excuse. Even when I got into Georgetown, she insisted on selling the house instead of letting me take out loans like everyone else. I told her it wasn't necessary, that I could work part-time and get scholarships, but she wouldn't listen. My breath caught in my throat. This was a complete rewriting of history. Andrew had been desperate to attend Georgetown, had tearfully told me it was his dream school. When his scholarship had covered only a portion of the tuition, he had been the one to suggest selling the house had assured me it was worth it for his future. I had been the one to hesitate, to suggest he consider less expensive options. But his heart had been set on Georgetown, and in the end, I had given in to his pleas. She's always had to be the martyr, Andrew continued, his voice bitter. Making these grand sacrifices and then holding them over my head. And now she expects me to feel guilty that she doesn't have a decent place to live? If she had made better financial decisions all these years, she wouldn't be in this situation. Tears pricked at my eyes, hot and sudden. Better financial decisions? Every spare penny I had earned had gone to giving Andrew opportunities I had, never had. Private school when the public options deteriorated, summer enrichment programs, SAT prep courses, professional attire for his law school interviews. I had put aside nothing for myself, trusting that my pension and Social Security would be enough, that the modest apartment I had rented for 15 years would remain affordable. Let's just get through the Sunset Pines tour tomorrow, Rebecca sighed. Maybe once she sees how nice it is, she'll come around. She'd better, Andrew muttered. I'm not having my mother living above a community center like some charity case. What would people think? I turned off the lamp and lay back on the uncomfortable mattress, tears sliding silently down my cheeks. The son I had raised, the boy who had once written in a Mother's Day card that I was the strongest, kindest person in the world, now saw me as nothing more than an inconvenience, a potential embarrassment, a problem to be solved with minimal disruption to his carefully curated life. In the darkness, as Andrew and Rebecca's voices finally quieted, a new emotion began to take shape within me, not just hurt or disappointment, but a slow-burning anger. For 32 years, I had put Andrew's needs before my own, had shaped my entire existence around giving him the opportunities Harold and I had dreamed of for him. And now, when I needed him for the first time, he saw me not as the mother who had sacrificed everything, but as just a widow, who should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention and assistance he deigned to offer. As I drifted into a restless sleep, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. It was time for Andrew to understand exactly what his childhood had cost me, not just in emotional currency, but in cold, hard cash. The Sunset Pines retirement community gleamed in the winter. Sunlight, its red brick buildings arranged around a central courtyard dusted with fresh snow. From the outside, it resembled an upscale college campus more than a senior living facility. A deliberate design choice, I suspected, to soften the reality of what it represented. Andrew had insisted on driving, positioning me in the back seat like a child while Rebecca sat up front. As we pulled into the circular driveway, a woman in a tailored pantsuit emerged from the main building, her smile professionally bright. Mr. Bennett, right on time. I'm Diane Mercer, Executive Director. She extended her hand to Andrew, then Rebecca, before finally acknowledging me. And you must be Martha. We're so looking forward to showing you your potential new home. Your potential new home. The presumption grated on me, but I smiled politely as we followed Diane into the lobby. The interior was tastefully decorated in muted beiges and blues, with comfortable seating areas and a wall of windows overlooking manicured grounds. A piano stood in one corner, unplayed. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant beneath a layer of artificial potpourri. As you can see, our common areas are designed to encourage socialization, Diane explained, gesturing to a group of elderly residents playing cards at a nearby table. We find that community engagement is crucial for maintaining cognitive health. I nodded, noting that most of the card players appeared at least 15 years older than me. One man dozed in his wheelchair, chin resting on his chest, while his table mates played around him. Our independent living apartments are in the East Wing, Diane continued, leading us down a carpeted hallway. We offer several floor plans, but based on Andrew's description of your needs, I think the Maple Suite would be perfect. The Maple Suite was a one-bedroom apartment with a kitchenette, bathroom, and small living area. It was clean and bright, with safety features subtly integrated into the design. Grab bars disguised as towel racks, an emergency call button. Beside the bed, a shower seat that folded discreetly against the wall when not in use. All meals can be taken in our dining hall, but residents are welcome to prepare simple meals here, Diane said, opening and closing cabinet doors in the kitchenette. Though we find most prefer the social aspect of communal dining. It's lovely, Rebecca said, running her hand over the granite countertop. Don't you think so, Martha? I was saved from answering by Diane, who continued her well-rehearsed pitch. The monthly fee includes weekly housekeeping, all utilities, transportation to medical appointments, and access to our full calendar of activities. We have everything, from Tai Chi to watercolor classes to wine and cheese socials on Friday evenings. Andrew nodded approvingly. And the medical support? Our wellness center is staffed 24 hours a day, Diane replied. For independent living residents, it's primarily for emergencies and routine check-ins, but knowing help is always available provides tremendous peace of mind. For whom? I asked, speaking for the first time since entering the building. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me in surprise. I'm sorry, Diane said. Peace of mind for whom? I clarified. For me or for my son? Andrew's expression hardened. Mom, it's a valid question, I interrupted, because I don't need 24-hour access to medical staff. I had my annual physical 3 months ago, and Dr. Patterson said I'm in excellent health for my age. I take a daily walk, do yoga twice a week, and the only medication I'm on is for mild hypertension, which is well controlled. Diane's professional smile never wavered. Many of our residents are in excellent health when they join us, Martha. The support services are there if and when they become necessary. And how much does all this cost? I asked, though I already knew the answer would be far beyond my means. Our Maple Suite is currently available at $4,200 per month, Diane replied, which is quite competitive for the level of amenities and care we provide. I couldn't help the small gasp that escaped me. That was more than triple my monthly income from Social Security and my pension combined. Andrew stepped in smoothly. As I mentioned on the phone, we'd be handling the financial arrangements. I stared at my son, a cold realization washing over me. You would be paying for this? Of course, Andrew said, as if it were obvious. It's the right solution, Mom. Safe, social, with support available when you need it. And conveniently out of your way, I added quietly. Rebecca inhaled sharply. Andrew's jaw tightened. Diane glanced between us, her smile faltering slightly. Perhaps this would be a good time to see the dining facilities? The chef is preparing a special lunch for prospective residents today. The tour continued, but I barely registered Diane's enthusiastic descriptions of the amenities, the hair, salon, the library, the small movie theater. My mind was racing, calculating what Andrew would be committing to. Over $50,000 a year to keep me in this gilded cage. A staggering sum that he was apparently willing to pay rather than let me live, independently in a small apartment above the community center. It wasn't about my safety or comfort. It was about his image, his convenience, his control. The realization settled like a stone in my stomach as we were shown to a table in the dining room, set with crisp linens and real china. A server appeared with water glasses and menus featuring today's offerings, poached salmon, chicken piccata, or vegetable lasagna. all with appropriately softened textures, I noted, for aging teeth. "I'll let you enjoy your lunch," Diane said. "I'll be at the reception desk when you're ready to discuss next steps." As she walked away, Andrew turned to me, his expression a mix of annoyance and confusion. "What was that about, Mom? You've been rude since we arrived." "Rude?" I echoed. "For asking questions about a place you expect me to live." "We're trying to help you," he insisted. "This place is perfect, safe, comfortable, with everything you could need." "Except independence," I replied. "Except agency over my own life," Rebecca interjected, her voice low and controlled. "Martha, be reasonable. Your current situation isn't sustainable. You need a permanent solution." "I've found one," I reminded her. "The apartment at the community center? A glorified storage room above a soup kitchen?" Andrew scoffed. "Where you'd have to work at your age just to afford it. That's not a solution, that's desperation." Something inside me snapped. All the hurt and disappointment of the past days crystallized into a cold, clear anger that straightened my spine and steadied my voice. "I worked as a bank teller for 30 years, I said evenly. "I took night shifts at a diner and sewed costumes for the community theater to make extra money. I cleaned houses on weekends when you needed braces that our insurance wouldn't fully cover. I have never been afraid of work, Andrew. What I'm afraid of is spending my remaining years being treated like a child by my own son." Andrew's face flushed red. "That's not fair. I'm offering to spend a small fortune to give you a safe, comfortable place to live. To warehouse me," I corrected him, "in a place where I won't inconvenience you or embarrass you in front of your important friends, where you can visit on holidays and birthdays and feel like you've done your duty." "Mom, you're being irrational." "No, I'm being clear-eyed for the first time in days." I folded my napkin and placed it beside my untouched plate. "Thank you for the tour, but I won't be moving to Sunset Pines. I have an interview with Edward Simmons tomorrow about the community center position, and if it goes well, I'll be moving into the apartment there on the 1st of the month." Andrew stared at me as if I'd slapped him. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious in my life." Rebecca touched Andrew's arm. "Maybe we should all take a breath. Discuss this at home when we're calmer." But Andrew shook his head, leaning across the table toward me. "If you insist on making this foolish choice, don't expect me to bail you out when it falls apart. I'm offering you a good solution. The best possible solution, and you're throwing it back in my face." "I'm declining your assistance," I clarified. "There's a difference." "Fine," he snapped, standing abruptly. "Let's go. This has been a waste of time." The drive back to Andrew's house was silent, tension filling the car like a physical presence. When we arrived, I went directly to the craft room and began packing my suitcase, my hands steady despite the emotional storm inside me. A soft knock at the door interrupted my folding. It was Rebecca, looking uncomfortable. "Martha, I think we all need to step back and reconsider," she said. "Andrew is upset, but he means well." I placed a sweater into my suitcase before answering. "I know he thinks he does. But he doesn't see me, Rebecca. He sees a problem to solve, an obligation to fulfill." "That's not fair," she protested, but her eyes slid away from mine. "He's trying to take care of you." "I don't need to be taken care of," I said gently. "I need to be respected." Rebecca sighed, leaning against the door frame. "Where will you go? You can't move into the community center apartment yet, even if you get the job." "I've called Lucille. She's happy to have me stay with her until the apartment is ready." I zipped my suitcase closed. "Please thank Andrew for his hospitality. I think it's best if I give him some space to accept my decision." "He'll be furious," Rebecca warned. "He'll get over it," I replied, with more confidence than I felt. "He always does." I called a taxi and was gone before Andrew returned from the errands he'd left to run after our tense return from Sunset Pines. It felt cowardly to leave without saying goodbye. But I knew another confrontation would only entrench us both further in our positions. Sometimes, retreat was the wiser strategy. Lucille welcomed me with open arms and a pot of strong tea. Her one-bedroom apartment was tiny but warm, with colorful quilts draped over worn furniture and the scent of cinnamon lingering in the air. "Can take the bed," she insisted. "I sleep in my recliner half the time anyway. My back prefers it." "I'm not kicking you out of your bed, Lucy," I protested. "The sofa is fine for a few weeks." We compromised with a rotation system, alternate nights on the bed and sofa, and settled into a surprisingly comfortable routine. During the day, while Lucille was at her part-time job at the library, I used her small kitchen table as a command center, spreading out paperwork and making calls. My interview with Edward went exactly as hoped. The board was impressed with my banking experience and community involvement, and the job was mine if I wanted it. The apartment would need work, fresh paint, deep cleaning, some minor repairs, but could be ready by the 1st of February, just 2 weeks away. "You can start on the paperwork whenever you're ready," Edward told me. "No rush, but there's a surprising amount of bureaucracy involved in hiring someone to manage bureaucracy." I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. "I can come in tomorrow if that works for you." The next few days passed in a blur of activity. I spent mornings at the community center, learning the filing systems and computer programs I would be managing, and afternoons working with a handyman named Ray to prepare the apartment. We stripped the faded wallpaper, painted the walls a soft sage green, and installed new light fixtures to brighten the space. Edward found room in the budget for new flooring when we discovered the old carpeting was hiding damaged wooden boards, and a local furniture store donated a gently used sofa when they heard about my situation. Through it all, my phone remained silent. No calls from Andrew, no texts asking where I was or if I was safe. His silence hurt more than his anger had, but I refused to make the first move. For too long, I had been the one to smooth things over, to apologize even when I wasn't wrong, to prioritize peace over principle. Not this time. Instead, I channeled my hurt into action. I retrieved my boxes from storage, donating items I no longer needed and carefully selecting what would come with me to my new, smaller home. I opened a new bank account at a credit union, transferring my modest savings from the account Andrew had insisted I establish at his bank years ago for my own protection. I filled out change of address forms and updated my contact information with doctors, insurance providers, and the Social Security office. Each step was a declaration of independence, a reclaiming of agency over my own life. But as my anger cooled, something else began to take its place. A deep sadness at how completely Andrew had failed to see me as a person separate from my role as his mother. And a growing realization that perhaps I had contributed to this failure by making myself so completely available, so endlessly self-sacrificing, that he had never had to consider my needs or desires as distinct from his own. One evening, as Lucille and I shared a simple dinner of soup and bread at her small kitchen table, she gave voice to what I had been thinking. "You need to make him understand what he's doing," she said, breaking a piece of bread. "Not just the disrespect now, but the years of taking you for granted." "How?" I asked. "He doesn't listen when I try to explain how his words hurt me." Lucille's eyes gleamed with a mischievous light I recognized from our decades of friendship. "Maybe don't use words. Use something he understands better." "Which is?" "Money," she said simply. "You're a banker, Martha. You've kept records of everything, your whole life. What if you showed him, in dollars and cents, exactly what you've invested in him over the years?" I stared at her, the idea taking root. "You mean, like an invoice?" "Exactly like an invoice," Lucille nodded. "Itemized, detailed with due date. The works." "That's petty," I said, but I couldn't deny the appeal of the idea. "It's educational," Lucille corrected. "He's a businessman. Speak his language." That night, as Lucille snored gently from the bedroom, I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad, a calculator, and my meticulously kept financial records dating back decades. I had always been organized with money, a necessity when raising a child alone on a limited income, and had preserved bank statements, receipts for major purchases, tuition invoices, and tax returns. Item by item, year by year, I began to reconstruct the financial history of Andrew's childhood and education. Basic necessities like food, clothing, and shelter. Medical expenses not covered by insurance. School supplies, extracurricular activities, summer camps. The private high school tuition when the public school's quality declined. SAT prep courses. College visits. The difference between in-state tuition he'd qualified for and the Georgetown education he'd insisted on. Law school application fees. The LSAT prep course. 3 years at Georgetown Law. I factored in the opportunity cost of selling our family home at a time when property values were low, the retirement contributions I had suspended to cover his expenses, the career advancement I had declined because it would have required evening hours when he needed supervision. As the numbers grew, climbing into 6 figures, I felt no triumph, only a profound sadness. These figures represented choices I had made willingly, sacrifices offered with love. I had never once regretted them, until, now, faced with the evidence that Andrew saw none of it as extraordinary, but merely as his due. The Riverside Cafe sat on a corner overlooking the frozen Winooski River, its large windows fogged with condensation from the warmth inside. I arrived 20 minutes early, selecting a table in the back corner where we would have privacy for what promised to be a difficult conversation. The manila envelope containing my itemized bill sat on the table before me, my name and Andrew's written in my neat handwriting on the front. I ordered a pot of Earl Grey tea and waited, watching the door with a strange calm that had settled over me in the days since my calculations. The anger that had initially fueled my project had burned away, leaving behind a cool clarity I hadn't felt in years. At precisely 3 o'clock, Andrew pushed through the cafe door, unwinding a cashmere scarf from his neck as he scanned the room. He looked impeccable in his tailored wool coat and leather gloves, every inch the successful attorney. When he spotted me, his expression was a carefully composed mask of professional neutrality. "Mom," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "You look well." "Thank you," I replied. "Tea?" He shook his head. "I have a client meeting at 4. I can't stay long." Of course he couldn't. My time had always been accommodated to his schedule, never the reverse. "I'll get right to the point then," I said, pushing the manila envelope toward him. "I want you to have this." Andrew frowned slightly, picking up the envelope but not opening it. "What is it?" "An education," I replied. "One that's been a long time coming." His frown deepened as he broke the seal and pulled out the contents. 15 pages of meticulously organized spreadsheets, receipts, and calculations. The cover page, typed on my old Smith Corona that Lucille had preserved in her closet, read simply, "Invoice, Andrew Bennett's Childhood and Education, 1989-2021. "What the hell is this?" he asked, his professional mask slipping as he flipped through the pages. "It's an itemized bill for everything I spent raising you," I explained, my voice calm. "From your first pair of shoes to your last law school textbook, plus opportunity costs. The career advancement I declined because it would have meant longer hours, the retirement contributions I suspended to pay for your SAT prep courses, the equity lost when I sold our home during a market downturn to fund your Georgetown education." Andrew's face had gone from confusion to disbelief to something approaching horror as he scanned the columns of figures. "Is this a joke? Some kind of guilt trip?" "No, Andrew. It's a business transaction, something you understand well. You've made it clear that our relationship is no longer based on mutual respect and affection, but on obligation and convenience. So I'm clarifying the terms." He pushed the papers away as if they were contaminated. This is ridiculous. Parents are supposed to provide for their children. That's how it works. Yes, I agreed. And children are supposed to honor their parents, not dismiss them as burdens, not lie to them about their competence, not warehouse them in institutions for their own convenience. Andrew's jaw tightened. Is that what this is about, Sunset Pines? I was trying to help you, Mom, to give you a safe place with support services. No, I said, shaking my head. You were trying to solve a problem. The problem of having an aging mother who might need assistance, who might embarrass you in front of your sophisticated friends, who doesn't fit neatly into the life you've constructed. That's not fair. What's not fair? I interrupted. My voice still calm but firm, is hearing my son tell his wife that I should be grateful for his attention because I'm just a widow. What's not fair is discovering that the child I sacrificed everything for sees me as nothing more than an obligation, one he'd prefer to outsource to professionals for $4,200 a month rather than help me maintain my independence. Andrew's eyes widened. You heard that? That was a private conversation. In your home, where you insisted I stay, with walls thin enough that I could hear every word, I pointed out, including your revisionist history about how I forced sacrifices on you that you never wanted, how I insisted on selling the house instead of letting you take loans like everyone else. A flush crept up Andrew's neck. I was frustrated. People say things they don't mean when they're frustrated. Or perhaps they say exactly what they mean, without the filter they usually apply. I took a sip of my tea, which had grown lukewarm. I've had time to think about this, Andrew, about how we got here. And I've realized that I bear some responsibility, too. He looked up, surprise flashing across his face. I enabled this, I continued, by never asking for anything in return, by making my sacrifices seem effortless, by putting your needs before my own for so many years that you came to see it as the natural order of things. I taught you that my purpose was to serve your ambitions, and now you're shocked to discover that I have ambitions of my own. Andrew shifted uncomfortably in his chair, glancing again at the invoice before him. So what is this? Revenge? You expect me to write you a check for... He flipped to the last page. $397,245, die 12? The absurdity of the figure, spoken aloud, hung in the air between us. Then, to Andrew's evident surprise, I laughed. No, Andrew, I don't expect payment. This isn't about money. It never was. It's about recognition. Acknowledgement of what I've invested in you. Not just financially, but emotionally, physically, spiritually. I tapped the top page of the invoice. Each of these line items represents a choice I made because I loved you and believed in your potential. I didn't resent a single dollar or hour spent, until I realized you saw none of it as extraordinary, but merely as your due. For the first time, something like genuine emotion flickered across Andrew's face. Discomfort, shame, perhaps even the dawning of understanding. I've accepted the position at the community center, I said, changing direction. I start officially on February 1st, though I've already been helping with the filing system. The apartment will be ready by then. We've painted it a lovely sage green, and Edward found room in the budget for new flooring. Andrew's brow furrowed. Mom, you can't be serious about living above a soup kitchen. Working at your age, I'm 68, Andrew, not 98, I said, echoing words I had spoken to Rebecca. I'm healthy, mentally sharp, and perfectly capable of answering phones and managing a filing system. And I'll be doing work that matters, helping connect people in need with services that can improve their lives. But it's not open for debate, I said firmly. I'm not asking for your permission or your approval. I'm informing you of my decision. Andrew ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of Harold that my heart clenched. What do you want from me then? Why are we here? It was a fair question. What did I want? Not money, not apologies, Not even a reversal of his offer to pay for Sunset Pines. I want you to see me, I said finally. Not as your mother, not as an elderly dependent, not as a problem to be solved, but as Martha Bennett, a woman with her own history, her own dreams, her own value independent of what she's given to you. Andrew looked at me, really looked at me perhaps for the first time in years, his expression unreadable. Then he glanced down at his watch. I have to go. My meeting. I know, I said, gathering my coat and scarf. You're a busy man with important things to do. I stood, reaching for the invoice, but Andrew's hand covered mine, stopping me. Leave it, he said quietly. I'll look at it more carefully later. I studied his face, searching for sincerity, for some sign that this confrontation had penetrated the walls he had built between us. I found uncertainty, discomfort, but also something that might have been the first flicker of recognition. All right, I said. Goodbye, Andrew. As I walked out of the cafe into the crisp Vermont afternoon, I felt no triumph, no vindication, only a quiet certainty that I had done what needed to be done. Whether Andrew ever truly understood the message behind my invoice was ultimately beyond my control. What mattered was that I had finally spoken my truth, had refused to be diminished or dismissed. The rest of the story was yet to be written, not just by Andrew's response, but by the life I would build for myself in the days and years ahead, a life defined not by what I had given up, but by what I would now create on my own terms. February bloomed with unexpected warmth, as if nature itself were celebrating my fresh start. Moving day arrived with clear skies and temperatures that hinted at an early spring. Lucille had organized a small army of helpers, friends from our bridge club, 2 strong teenagers from the community center's after-school program, and Ray the handyman who had become an unexpected ally in transforming my new apartment. "Where do you want this bookshelf, Mrs. B?" asked Miguel, one of the teenagers, carefully maneuvering my treasured oak shelving unit through the door. "Against that wall, please," I directed, pointing to the space between 2 newly installed windows that flooded the apartment with morning light. "And it's Martha, remember? Mrs. Bennett makes me feel ancient." Miguel grinned, revealing braces. "My abuela would smack me if I called an elder by their first name." "Your abuela sounds like a wise woman," I laughed. "Mrs. B is a good compromise." The apartment had exceeded my expectations. What had once been a glorified storage room was now a bright, welcoming studio with fresh paint, new laminate flooring, and a compact but functional kitchenette. The community center board had approved, replacing the ancient appliances after Edward argued that a functioning apartment would be an asset for future staff as well. My furniture, carefully selected pieces saved from storage or donated by friends, fit the space perfectly. The sofa, Lucille had found at a church rummage sale, opened into a comfortable bed. My grandmother's rocking chair sat in the corner by the largest window, overlooking the community garden that would burst with vegetables and flowers in a few months' time. It was smaller than any home I'd lived in as an adult, but it was mine. Each item had been chosen with intention, each placement a deliberate decision. For the first time in decades, I had created a space that reflected my needs and preferences alone. Ray finished installing safety bars in the bathroom. Not because "you need them now, but it's good planning," he'd insisted, and joined me for a cup of tea at my small dining table. "Place looks real nice, Martha," he said, surveying our work with satisfaction. "Quite a transformation." "Yes," I agreed, thinking of the parallel transformation within myself over these past weeks. Quite a transformation indeed. By late afternoon, the move was complete. Lucille and I stood in the center of the apartment, surveying the results of our collective efforts. "It's perfect," she declared, throwing an arm around my shoulders. "Independent living with community right downstairs, and half your rent covered by your job? You've landed on your feet, my friend." "With a little help," I acknowledged, squeezing her hand gratefully. After my helpers departed, Loaded down with homemade cookies as thanks, I savored the quiet of my new home. The sounds of the community center drifted up from below. Children's laughter from the after-school program. The clatter of pots and pans as the kitchen staff prepared the evening meal for the homeless shelter next door. I unpacked the last box, filled with framed photographs I had curated carefully. Harold on our wedding day, Andrew as a toothless 7-year-old, the three of us at the beach, squinting into the sun. I arranged them on my bookshelf, positioning them so they were visible but not dominant in the space. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Lucille. "Forgot to tell you. Envelope came for you yesterday. Put it in your desk drawer." Curious, I opened the drawer of my small writing desk and found a thick manila envelope, identical to the one I had given Andrew 2 weeks earlier. My heart stuttered as I recognized his handwriting on the front. Martha Bennett, personal, and confidential. I sat in my rocking chair by the window, the weight of the envelope heavy in my lap. Part of me didn't want to open it, fearful of what Andrew's response might contain. More justifications? Legal threats? A dismissal of everything. I had tried to communicate? Taking a deep breath, I broke the seal and withdrew the contents. The first item was a check, made out to me for the exact amount of my invoice, $387,245. 12. My hand flew to my mouth in shock. He had actually attempted to pay the bill? Behind the check was a letter, written on Andrew's personal stationery rather than his law firm's letterhead. I unfolded it with trembling fingers. "Mom, I've spent the past 2 weeks studying your invoice. My first instinct was anger. How dare you put a price tag on what parents are supposed to do freely? But as I reviewed each line item, each calculation, memories surfaced that I had long buried or rewritten to suit my narrative. I remembered the summer you worked double shifts at the diner so I could attend space camp, the one with the NASA scientist you'd read about in the local paper. I remembered finding you asleep at the kitchen table surrounded by scholarship applications, red pen still in your hand. I remembered the day we toured Georgetown Law, how you pretended not to be intimidated by the grand buildings and the students in their expensive clothes. How you asked such insightful questions that the admissions officer assumed you must be an alumna yourself. I remembered, too, the day you handed me the keys to our family home. Not as a gift, but as capital for my education. I told myself then that it was your choice, that you insisted. But I always knew you would have preferred to keep the house where you and Dad had built so many memories. You sold it because I made it clear that Georgetown was the only acceptable path for my ambitions. Looking at these memories through the lens of your invoice forced me to confront an uncomfortable truth. I have been taking your sacrifices for granted for decades. Worse, I have been diminishing them, recasting them as obligations rather than gifts, to absolve myself of the debt of gratitude I've always carried but never acknowledged. The check enclosed represents my attempt to repay the financial component of what I owe you. It cannot possibly address the emotional investment, the sleepless nights, the dreams deferred. No amount could. But I want you to have it. Not because I think it settles our account, but because I want you to use it for yourself. To build the life you want, rather than the one I tried to prescribe for you. Whether you accept the money or not, I ask only that you allow me the chance to begin rebuilding our relationship, not as a son entitled to his mother's endless sacrifice, but as two adults with mutual respect and genuine affection. With love and profound gratitude, Andrew P.S. Rebecca and I would like to invite you to dinner next Sunday, at a restaurant of your choosing. No discussion of senior living facilities or financial arrangements, just family reconnecting. Please let me know if you're available. Tears streamed down my face as I read the letter a second time, then a third. The words I had longed to hear, acknowledgement, gratitude, respect, were there on the page in Andrew's precise handwriting. The check still lay in my lap, a tangible symbol of his understanding, however belated. Would I cash it? I wasn't sure. The money represented security, options, freedom, all things I had sacrificed to give Andrew his start in life. But more valuable than the money was the recognition behind it, the validation of my worth beyond my maternal role. I folded the letter carefully and returned it to its envelope, placing it in my desk drawer, not hidden away, but accessible when I needed a reminder of this turning point. The check I left on top of the desk, a decision for another day. Outside my window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Below, people were gathering for the community dinner, their voices rising in a comforting murmur. In a few minutes, I would join them, not as a recipient of charity, but as part of the team that created this space of warmth and welcome. My phone buzzed with a text from Edward. Reminder: staff meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m., bring coffee preferences. For office order. Welcome aboard officially. I smiled, typing a quick reply. I'll be there. French roast, black. Thanks for everything. As I prepared to head downstairs, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror by the door. The woman reflected there looked different from the uncertain, hurt individual who had stood on Andrew's doorstep just weeks ago. She stood straighter, her eyes clearer, her expression peaceful but resolute. At 68, I had done what many never manage at any age. I had reinvented myself, not by erasing my past, but by reclaiming its value. I had reminded my son, and, more importantly myself, that I was more than just a widow, more than just a mother. I was Martha Bennett, a woman of worth, wisdom, and limitless potential. Whatever came next, whether Andrew and I rebuilt our relationship or simply established more respectful boundaries, whether I cashed his check or returned it, whether this apartment became my home for years or merely a way station to something else, I would face it on my own terms. Not as someone seeking gratitude for past sacrifices, but as someone embracing future possibilities. The invoice had served its purpose. The ledger was balanced. The next chapter awaited. I turned from the mirror, grabbed my cardigan, and headed downstairs to join my new community, my steps light with the freedom that comes from being seen by others, but most importantly by oneself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.